So last year, I suggested to Mike that we invite Dr. Ofra Eshel to deliver this year's memorial lecture for Coralie. His response was immediate, yes. We both felt that the synergy between Coralie and Dr. Eshel was undeniable. I vividly recall Coralie introducing Dr. Eshel's 2016 paper, The Voice of Breakdown, on facing the unbearable traumatic experience in psychoanalytic work at my GRASP meeting in late 2019. I remember it was a paper that spoke to her deeply. In it, Dr. Eshel wove together Winnicott's ideas on early unthinkable breakdowns, those that have not yet been experienced and must be relived within the analytic setting. She explored the complex clinical implications of the tension between knowing and not knowing in trauma work, illuminating the profound challenge of hearing the voice of breakdown that cries out from the belated double wounding. Dr. Eshel underscored the critical importance of experiencing the unexperienced with the analyst, a theme that resonated deeply with Coralie, who had just completed her work on the life Esidimeni arbitration. For that work, Coralie was awarded the first IPA Community Award in 2019 for psychoanalysis and the law, a recognition of her commitment to psychoanalysis as a force for justice. Dr. Eshel's thinking, rooted in the works of Bion, Winnicott, Ogden, Green, Eigen, and Kristeva, to name only a few, align with the theorists Coralie was most passionate about. Then in 2020, the world faced a new and devastating trauma, the COVID-19 pandemic. Through that time of death, terror, loss, and fear, Coralie held us all, her GRASP colleagues and community. She carried hope for us when hope was difficult to find. For me, Coralie embodied Winnicott's prayer, "O God, may I be alive when I die," and through GRASP we keep her legacy alive. Today we honor her, her kinetic spirit, her impassioned soul. It was only natural then to invite Dr. Eshel to speak today. Given South Africa's complex, traumatic, and often fragmented history, her work resonates powerfully with our community. It speaks directly to the heart of what it means to be human, making this engagement with her ideas profoundly meaningful. Dr. Ofra Eshel is a training and supervising analyst and senior faculty member of the Israel Psychoanalytic Society and Institute. She is a fellow of the International Psychoanalytic Association, the IPA, an honorary member of the New Center for Psychoanalysis, Los Angeles, and she is the former vice president of the International Winnicott Association. She is the founder and head of the postgraduate program Winnicott Beyond an Independent Psychoanalysis, Radical Breakthroughs at the Advanced Studies of the Program of Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, the Faculty of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. In 2024, she founded the advanced program Radical Breakthroughs in Contemporary Psychoanalysis at Deep Springs in Beijing, China. A prolific writer, her papers have been published in psychoanalytic journals and book chapters and translated into 10 languages and presented at national and international conferences across 4 continents. And today, South Africa makes it her 5th continent. In 2023, she was ranked as the first of the top 10 authors writing on Winnicott between 1978 and 2023. She is the author of The Emergence of Analytic Oneness into the Heart of Psychoanalysis, with translations into Chinese in 2024 and this year into Brazilian Portuguese. She is in private practice in Tel Aviv, Israel. So just before I hand over to Dr. Eshel, I'd also like to welcome a fellow South African, Dr. Eshel's guest today, Laurie Dawes, and we are so honored that you are able to join us for this memorial lecture to Coralie today. So, Dr. Eshel, Ofra, it's a great honor to welcome you to present this year's Coralie Trotter Memorial Lecture. Over to you.
Distinguished colleagues, this is the first time that I am speaking to colleagues in South Africa, and I am delighted to be here today, even though this meeting is online and not in person. I am especially honored because this lecture is given in memory of Coralie Trotter, who all of you seem to love and highly appreciate. When Bruce Lang wrote me to ask me to present this lecture, his request was so touching and emotional that I was moved, felt I could not refuse, and I accepted it immediately. So I would like to thank wholeheartedly Bruce Lang and Mike Ben and Grasp for organizing this event. I also add special thanks to Yvonne for her assistance with the online procedure and for running the share screen. I wish to thank all of you for attending this meeting. I hope that we will be listening to each other and thinking together, and that these sharings of ideas and clinical experiences on working psychoanalytically will allow us to enrich and deepen our work, especially with more disturbed patients and difficult treatment situations. And lastly, as always, I am profoundly indebted to my patients, my true partners in unknown ways. I have learned with them, and I'm still learning the true meaning of delving into the heart of psychoanalysis. The lecture. Why let the last scream come to life? On working analytically at the frontier of unthinkable trauma. I would like to open my presentation with the powerful words of Julia Kristeva. Let us say it without false modesty. No other modern experience, apart from psychoanalysis, offers such a prospect for recommencing psychic life, and thus, in a sense, life as such. This is perhaps the most precious, the most serious gift that psychoanalysis has given to humanity. Since Augustine, and against the weight of what is called historical or biological destiny, psychoanalysis alone is willing to take on, and sometimes even to win, this wager on the possibility of a new beginning. Kristeva. I am struck by this profound truth about psychoanalysis. Its greatest strength is not its theories, but its ability to transform. The psychoanalytic quest and struggle for this possibility of a new beginning are at the heart of this presentation. Contemporary psychoanalytic approaches strive to extend the reach of psychoanalytic treatment to more and most disturbed patients, to more deeply disturbed aspects of patient personalities and experiences, to difficult treatment situations and non-communicating layers. Over the past decade, psychoanalytic thinking has moved theoretically and clinically to the realms of trauma, both personal and general, direct and transmitted across generations, and to emphasizing the distortion of fundamental processes of relatedness. This has called for changes in psychoanalytic thinking and technique. Working psychoanalytically with non-neurotic patients and state of mind challenges traditional theory and practice, and, in my opinion, forges an emerging dimension of radical presence and transformative human connection that 21st century psychoanalysis is not only moving toward, but must also deepen into in order to cope with its clinical challenges alongside the emerging possibilities. Being within, being with, being at one with, on transformation in oneness. For many years, perhaps from the very beginning of my therapeutic work with patients, and especially during the last 34 years of my analytic work, the most profound and clinical impact on my way of thinking and working has been and remains the lived experience with my patient. Along the way, enriching psychoanalytic theoretical and clinical influences, primarily Winnicott and Bion, especially late Bion, and also Green, Sears, Goldstein, Tastin, Bolas, Ogden, and Eigen, have provided me with deeply intriguing ways of delving into the nature and meaning of these therapeutic experiences. Yet it has been, and still is, my work with patients, particularly with more disturbed patients and various difficult treatment situations, that made me face, explore, and go beyond what were formerly thought to be the limits of analytic work, and move into more challenging depths of the analytic process, previously unmet and unknown, at times unexpected, and sometimes even mysterious. Based on these clinical experiences, my way of working and thinking over the years has shifted toward the ontological, experiential possibilities of analytic work, and has forged an ontological experiential dimension, which has become for me a fundamental dimension of clinical psychoanalysis. It has centered on two key terms: the analyst or therapist presencing, being there, within the patient experiential psychic reality and within the grip of the analytic process, and the ensuing deep patient analyst interconnectedness or witnessing with age, an emergent new entity of patient with analyst, a two-in-oneness that may deepen into at-one-ment with the patient's innermost emotional reality. A living entity that is fundamentally inseparable into its two participants. Analyst and patient are inevitably bound together through this way of analytic work. This is primarily an interconnected relatedness rather than an interactive relationship, and it concentrates on the ontological, being, quality of the analytic experience that is lived through with the analyst, rather than the epistemological, meaning knowing, and interpretative qualities. The analyst gives himself over to becoming part of the patient's ongoing emotional reality and mental processes as an area of receptivity, experiencing processes, and transformation. Patient and analyst live and experience together, according to Winnicott. Or, I add, in difficult cases, they live the unthinkable, the unexperienced, and the unlived together, living through extremely dark, unknown processes in difficult treatments. This patient-analyst entity of experiencing and becoming in oneness allows for traumatic experiences that the patient has been unable to bear to enter the now and be jointly met, experienced, and lived through together. I have also called this process, in its extreme singularity, quantum interconnectedness, from physicist David Bohm's phrase, the quantum interconnectedness of this system, in order to convey the profound implications of this quantum-like psychoanalytic quality of experience. This move resonates with the ontological shift that is taking place in psychoanalysis, which reflects a fundamental commitment to the principle of being and becoming in the experience, rather than an epistemological exploration and interpretation. The spectrum of analytic oneness. This way of working is a fundamental dimension of my analytic work with patients, but varying states of the unknown and unsought intensify and develop into the full need and the full potential, the ways of being, becoming, and experiencing in oneness in the analytic work. Over the last 13 years, I have further developed this dimension of patient-analyst interconnected being and experiencing. I have expanded it beyond analytic notion of witnessing, interactive relationship, and even intersubjectivity in analytic field theories to the espousing of deep patient-analyst interconnectedness of witnessing that may deepen into attunement with the innermost psychic reality of the patient. Inspired especially by Winnicott's posthumously published and Let Beyond's writings, along with my clinical experience, I have emphasized the radical ontological experience of patient and analyst being in oneness at a primordial point of origin, in order to be able to reach and transform the patient's most extremely dissociated, unknown, unrepresented, and non-communicating state, mainly of unthinkable, unexperienced early breakdown, Winnicott, and nameless dread and mental catastrophe beyond. Consequently, in recent years, I have formulated and proposed a spectrum of analytic oneness, a spectrum of varying degree of patient-analyst oneness within different unconscious or unknown states in the analytic work. It focuses primarily on the extent of the traumatization and the incapacity to represent, since representation is disrupted, progressively lost, or fail to develop. At the same time, it opens up new ontological experiential versus epistemological possibilities for working within difficult psychic realities. It includes 1. At the one end of the spectrum is the Freudian repressed unconscious. Consists of psychic material that could have been repressed, in which the interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind, Freud. That is, an epistemological exploration for the recovering of repressed material through the interpretation and analysis of the transference and the interpretation of dreams. This is the most differentiated mode of analytic functioning. However, despite the centrality of the Freudian repressed unconscious, Freud himself pointed out that although what is repressed is unconscious, the unconscious is not only the repressed. He wrote, "We recognize that the unconscious does not coincide with the repressed. It is still true that all that is repressed is unconscious, but not all that is unconscious is repressed. We find ourselves confronted by the necessity of postulating a third unconscious, which is not repressed." Freud. So too, the unrepressed unconscious of non-neurotic patient and state of mind consists of psychic material that could not be repressed, but is dissociated, split off, and may become unrepresented. Thus, the unconscious in the realms of unbearable and catastrophic psychic trauma is no longer the repressed unconscious of psychoneurosis. It is the repressed unconscious, and it attempts to extend psychoanalytic practice beyond psychoneurosis and beyond what were formerly thought to be the limits of analytic work. It ranges from unrepressed realm, level 1, that is traumatically dissociated and unknown, to the deeper unrepressed and unrepresented realm, level 2, of the most unknown and unknowable, unthinkable psychic reality, the deepest traumatic and non-communicating issues of human life. Analytic work in the unrepressed unconscious entails being in various degrees of patient and analyst state of oneness and transformation in oneness, moving from patient and analyst to in oneness, level 1, to at-one-ment with the patient, unrepressed and unrepresented psychic reality, level 2. I'll explain. In level 1, the unbearable traumatic unknown remains at a level of partial or weak representation and can be transformed by the analytic representation through the analyst reverie, dream thought, alpha function, containing capacity in Bayesian, intersubjective, and analytic field models inspired by early Bayesian's projective introjective model, and by vicarious introspection in code self-psychology, and more. These are transformation in K, knowledge, according to Bayesian, thus getting to know and transforming together, even when one minds dissociate, through patient with analyst, two in oneness. Many of the contemporary psychoanalytic concepts belong to this level 1. But in level 2, the most unfathomable and unthinkable realm of traumatization, in particular the great unknown of mental catastrophe beyond an early breakdown, Winnicott, the patient emotional reality is mostly unthinkable, unexperienced, unrepressed, and unrepresented. This necessitates going beyond the limits of representation and analytic thinking, dreaming and containing K, to terms of being, to the ontological experiential analytic work of being there, present thing, within the darkness of the innermost traumatic psychic reality, becoming at one with the patient's inner emotional reality of the unknown trauma, namely, being within in a way that essentially other than to seek what can be thought, known, and interpreted. The unthinkable cannot be thought by its name, but only relived and gone through with or at one with the analyst. In beyond powerful words, this means that the understanding of the patient and the identification with him that have been regarded as sufficient hitherto must be replaced by something quite different. The transformation in K must be replaced by the transformation in O, and K must be replaced by fate. With this O, the psychoanalyst must be at one. To sum up, Ferro, the Italian psychoanalyst Ferro, recently highlights the transition in psychoanalysis from a theory and technique based on interpretation to a theory and technique whose pillars are transformations. I further point out that transformation entails transformation in oneness, namely varying patient and analyst states of oneness which come to life in the analytic work, moving from patient and analyst to in oneness to attunement with the patient's deepest traumatic, non-communicating emotional reality. The critical idea is that analytic oneness can open difficult to reach domain for further experiencing and transformation in treatment. Patient with analyst or patient at one with analyst, psyche with psyche, may undergo the devastation experience that made it impossible for the patient to be there and experience it alone. I believe that only by being within the patient's deepest feeling state and their emotional impact can patient with analyst be given a new chance to relive and break through massive traumatic impacts. This deepest level is closely connected to Bion's and Winnicott's late writings on mental catastrophe and early breakdown, and the massive defense organizations urgently constructed to protect anxiety. Its degree of intensity is related to the extent of the traumatization and of the failure of not being held and contained at the time, as well as to how early on it occurred, since early trauma breaks the personality that forms at the beginning of the individual life. The cardinal question here, and in my opinion, one of the most difficult questions at the heart of psychoanalytic work, is how willing we are, analysts and therapists, to reach to the unbearable realness of the patient's most traumatic experience, breakdown and madness, to face the horror, pain, despair, in hearing the voice that cries out from the psychic wound, or has become muted, a voice from the crypt in Grotstein word. When the patient in treatment repeatedly points to the ongoing wounding without the ability to go through it, how do we stay within and go through this devastating state of catastrophe and breakdown in status nascendi until patient with analyst or patient at one with analyst become able to experience, tolerate, and cope with the anxieties that were unthinkable in their original setting. I will now let the clinical material speak, describing a clinical sequence of a difficult treatment and closely follow my experience of being there, growing at one with the patient's unknown emotional reality as the treatment unfolded, and the very slow becoming of a lived emotional change. Clinical illustration. Into the patient unknown and non-communicating psychic reality. Ben, a very tall, athletic, and strikingly handsome, this is very important, strikingly handsome young man of 28, came to me for psychoanalytic psychotherapy because of a prolonged depressive crisis over the preceding 2 years, centering on a girlfriend who had betrayed and left him. He had already been through 2 failed psychotherapists, which had terminated with a recommendation for medication. In response to my question, he vacantly described what had happened with the girl. There were always girls who had been interested in him, who had come on to him. But after a night or two, they would leave. Only this girl, Julie, had stayed, insisted on continuing the relationship, saying that she loved him. After 3 months together, she decided to go abroad. He did not object and even felt relieved. She left, and about a month later, the tone of her letters changed. They became more sporadic until they finally stopped. On her return, 3 months later, she told him that while abroad, she had had a relationship with someone else. And although it had ended, she categorically refused to go back to Ben, despite his repeated entreaties that she come back and try again. From her point of view, Ben was a closed issue, she said. He began calling her day and night, sometimes speaking, pleading with her to come back, feeling humiliated but unable to stop, and other times not speaking at all. Each night he hung around her house for hours, drunk, drugged, in a daze, tracking her movements. Was she at home? What time did she switch off the light? What time did she go to bed? Did she have someone else? Despite enrolling in a university, he barely attended lecture, and throughout those 2 years repeatedly failed all his examinations. He sometimes did random, simple work, mainly at night, to partially cover his expenses. It was a major, all-encompassing emotional and functional crisis. Having told me this, and after asking him a few more informational questions and receiving informational answers at the first sessions, there appeared to be nothing else to say, to talk about, or relate to. Any effort of mine to go on asking and encouraging him to talk always ended up in the same meaningless, empty, futile place. Thus, zilch for me, he would repeatedly respond to anything, his words addressed to no one. There was no area that interested him. His studies, zilch. He had no interest in what he was studying and no interest in any other field either. The long trip around the world he had taken after his military service and the places he had visited, zilch. Going out with friends, zilch. Work, zilch. The treatment, zilch. And anyway, they had told him everything in his previous treatments, which also this zilch for me. When I gave up on my attempts to ask questions and encourage him to talk, a silence reigned that was no less hollow and dreary. It was not his not speaking, but this zilch that crept into speech and silence, into every corner, everywhere, limitless, with no way out. It was as if there was an irreparable fault in the aliveness of his psychic apparatus. Zilch, a desolate emotional wasteland. There was only the nocturnal, disconnected, ceaseless, and despairing hanging around Julie's house. Perhaps because she, by leaving him, or maybe by loving and leaving him, was the only one who had broken through this nothingness. After about 2.5 months of this, I thought that perhaps if he were in treatment with a younger female therapist, one closer to him in age and his world, something more libidinal, more alive might evolve. And perhaps I had also become weary. Thus I offered him this alternative, but he immediately replied that he had no intention of going to any other therapist, neither younger nor older, that this was the last treatment he was ever going to try, and besides, he did not know why he was still trying at all. And so we continued treatment for another month. Gradually, there was a significant diminishing of his nocturnal wandering, and then, after being in treatment for almost 4 months, he told me that he saw no point in continuing. Nothing had changed. It was end of year exam time, and it would be better to spend his time studying. After one further session, I accepted his decision, asking him only to call me if matter deteriorated. He called about 3 weeks later. He told me that he had failed all of his exams, that he had not even sat for some of them, and that he had resumed his nocturnal wandering around Julie's house. We resumed treatment. During this next period in treatment, Ben tried something different. He brought the letter Julie had written him from abroad and read them to me, trying to seek and discover with me what had happened and when had she stopped loving him, what had gone wrong and why. He brought photographs of the two of them that had been taken before she went abroad. They showed a handsome couple with Julie looking at him very affectionately. During these months, his wandering around Julie in the treatment house replaced his nocturnal wandering around her house. He struck up a relationship with a new girl, but she too terminated after 2 weeks. Once again, a relationship that was terminated abruptly. Once again, there was this terrible gap between his remarkably attractive appearance and the incomprehensible and unavoidable collapse of any relationship. After about 3 months into this stage of treatment, he came to a session looking very tired. He said he had hardly slept that night because he had been with a woman several years older than him, whom he had met at a pub, but he did not want to continue the relationship with her. He did not want to hurt her because she wanted something serious. She was as desperate as he was when he wanted someone. Perhaps he would go out with her a few more times when he was lonely and drunk. He added that he was not attending lectures. He did not feel like it, did not want anything. He asked if he could lie down on the couch in my room. He lay down and asked, "Can't see you?" Then he lay silent and motionless until the hour was up, looking very long and stiff. I thought, although I did not know for sure, that he had closed his eyes. He awoke himself just before the session was over and left. In the following session, he did not utter a single word. I felt that he had been frightened by his letting go at the previous session. The day before the next session, he called to say he would not be coming. He did not want to continue treatment. I asked him to come so that we could talk about it. He came and stated at the outset that he did not want to be in treatment any longer. It ran counter to the macho image he had been raised to assume. It annoyed him. Then he fell silent. Later he said that he had called Julie that week, and she had told him that she did not want to speak to him, that he was no longer part of her life, and then she had hung up on him. He did not want to be in treatment. I said that he could not leave treatment like this without something improving for him in some area, in his studies, at work, in love. It doesn't matter. I'll go somewhere or other, he said. But I felt that he could not go in this state, and in stark contrast to the previous time he had wanted to leave treatment. Now I was fighting for this failed treatment with a stubbornness incomprehensible to me, telling him that I could not let him go like that, to nowhere, despairing and destructive, that this ran counter to my professional and human responsibility. And as I spoke, I felt tears coming into my eyes. He looked at me, seeing my distress, and said, almost feelingly, I thought, "You are the only one who cares about me. Of all the psychologists, I know it's not a matter of ego with you, but you just don't understand. I'm lost. I am lost. There is no chance at all. Give the treatment a year," I said. "You came to the treatment at the beginning of April, so stay in treatment until next April. And if it does not help you, I won't say another word if you want to go." I came at the beginning of April, he asked. That when I was born. We checked my appointment book and indeed found that he had come for the first time one day after his birthday. Something in this new, surprising, intangible feeling of time, which had thus entered the treatment, drew my attention to the fact that every 3 or 4 months a crisis would arise in treatment. Julie, too, had gone abroad after 3 months with him and had betrayed him after 4. As he had come to treatment at the time of his birth, had something happened during his first year of life, after 4 months? Had something been stopped and cut off at that time? But what? I suggested something that I do not usually do, that he ask his mother what had happened when he was about 4 months old. At first he refused, saying, "What would be the use of my asking? And anyhow, what is the use of my telling you things?" I told him that now I know him differently, now that I have come to know his suffering and distress. After seeing the letters and getting to know the recurrent and incomprehensible collapse of every relationship. He said that he had sin in his head that he could not relate. But when I asked him what's on his mind, he cannot stand it. I should not ask him. I should say what I think, and he'll correct me. We agreed to this. He came to the next sessions without having asked his mother. I waited. How can I ask a question like that? It's weird. What would I say to her? He finally said. I suggested that he tell her the therapist asked me to ask. When he did ask her, he came back and said that his mother had been astonished by his question and told him that at that time terrible things had happened that she had never spoken about. She wanted to tell him now, but he did not want to hear. And then she asked him his and my permission to tell me directly. He gave his permission and I gave mine. I subsequently received a long, poignant letter from her in which she recounted that when Ben was 3 months old, he had contracted spastic bronchitis. She spent the nights walking around, holding him in her arms, frightened for his life, while he struggled to breathe, wheezing, almost suffocating. A month later, when he was 4 months old, his brother, who was a year older, contracted meningitis. His condition was critical, and she sat at his bedside in the hospital for 3 weeks without going home and without seeing Ben during that entire period. When she finally came back home, Ben neither cried nor was happy. He was not ill, but completely quiet, and she thought that everything had passed satisfactorily. And, she added, she herself had been too tired to think about anything. During the subsequent months, she herself had undergone a period of terrible fatigue and depression. She had been unable to bear anything more. I read the letter and realized that it was here that he had given up forever, had emotionally died out, had become this das Zilch for me. A little baby was suddenly lying there here in bed, abandoned, lost, dying, night after night, crying and screaming until his scream faded away and died out. But when I read to Ben what she had written, he sat there with a blank, immobile face. I see that this moves you, he said at the end, but it makes no difference to me. It was a long time ago. It's nothing. It's das Zilch for me. However, during the period in treatment that followed, things flowed a little more freely. He spoke more, bringing up the idea of self-destruction, to hurt yourself in order to hurt the person who had hurt you, that you are angry at them, that they should feel bad, that they should feel that it's their responsibility. But at the end of March, toward the end of the 4 months extension that had been granted, he gradually withdrew and shut down. His word dried up, and at the beginning of April, he told me that a year had gone by, there had been no change, and he was stopping treatment. This time, I did not argue. You kept to the agreement, and I am thankful for that, I said. and added softly, "I am very sorry that despite the great effort we both made, I did not manage to help you." The treatment was terminated. About 5 months later, Ben called to tell me that he was taking summer semester at the university. At first, I did not grasp the significance of this, but then he added that he was taking the summer semester because he wanted to complete his studies by March of the following year, as this time he had passed all of his end-of-year exams. I realized that a change was taking place. He called again 3 months later. He told me that he had successfully completed summer semester, that he would finish his studies in March. He called again in March, after passing all his final examination. He had begun a relationship with a new girl, and again it was terminated by her a week later. He thought he should resume treatment. We arranged to begin again in April, this time on a day before his 13th birthday. At the first session, we were back in treatment. He quietly recited a song by Israeli singer Ehud Banai that I had not heard before. The boy is 30. He has got a high fever. He is out of work and love. And when he reached the chorus, there were tears in his eyes. Please hurry, put a bandage on my heart before you lay me down to sleep, and tell me of the child I once was, how joyful I was at the first rain. The treatment had continued ever since for years. After another year, it turned into analysis at his request. Heavy, difficult, draining, but surviving, enduring, and becoming, with time, truly transformative. Concluding thoughts. I view psychoanalytic treatment at its heart as a radical endeavor to open to the patient's psychic reality, especially that which is beyond the limits of the known, the thinkable, and the represented, and to enable the becoming of a new experience within the throes of the traumatic unknown, unthinkable, and unrepresented, through the singular revelatory nature of patient analysts being in oneness. This shift toward a fuller psychoanalytic ontology and transformation in oneness engenders new possibilities for revolutionizing analytic work and extending the reach of psychoanalytic treatment. The level of extremely dissociated massive psychic trauma goes beyond the epistemological Freudian exploration for the recovering of repressed material. It even goes beyond the transformational two-in-oneness of the analyst reverie, dream thought, and containing capacity needed for further epistemological exploration. Transformation in K of the not yet thought traumatic unknown. Rather, the depths of the unknown, especially the most traumatic unknown, or the patient emotional reality, is mostly unthinkable, unexperienced, and unrepresented, necessitates, by definition, going beyond epistemological exploration to the analytic work of being and becoming within the patient's psychic reality, at one with the patient's innermost emotional reality. patient with analyst or patient at one with analyst are given a new chance to relive it. This is essential to the practical work of psychoanalysis. T.S. Eliot's powerful work conveyed the essence of this movement into becoming in oneness, into another intensity, for a further union, a deeper communion through the dark cold and the empty desolation. Returning now to my patient pain in the clinical illustration, these heartbroken patients, according to Tustin, bear the inscription of an early catastrophe in which massive defense organization had shut down and decimated the experience of unthinkable agony, inner brokenness, and emotional desolation. It thus lurks within the psyche as an unknown, unexperienced, unlived, and dead part, deeply woven into the very fabric of their being. Hence the critical importance in the treatment of the analyst or therapist being within, becoming at one with the unexperienced brokenness. This being at one creates the fundamental possibility of patient analyst in oneness to undergo the unbearable heartbreaking that made it impossible for the patient to be there and experience it alone. Ben found his annihilating last scream in my cry for him. He had slowly become able to face the inevitable heartbreak buried under his all-encompassing, incessant zilch through my being within and experiences of it. This way of working has become for me an essential experience and a language of fundamental possibilities for extending the reach of psychoanalytic treatment when working within difficult psychic realities of the unthinkable trauma. And on more personal level, my working with patients in this way and being open and internally available to being touched by the patient's emotional reality give me a felt sense of how much can be reached and discovered in psychoanalytic work and how far and deep our analytic capacities may still develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ofra, for that incredibly rich, powerful, and courageous paper. I found it deeply moving, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your work with us like you have. I would like to invite people to ask questions and also do something that Coralie invited us to do after reading in Grasp. If anyone just wants to share their associations with the papers, any reflections with the paper, please do so. So let's just wait to see what comes up. If you want to ask a question or share, just use the chat function, the raise your hand function. I see Kelly Bills here.
Phew, Dr. Eshel, that very, very, as Bruce says, very moving and very beautiful and painful. And I suppose I'm left with two thoughts. I've read some of your other papers as well in the last couple of weeks, your beyond sexuality, beyond perversion. So other clinical examples of these types of patients. And I was wondering, when you work with patients who have unrepresented minds in this way, two thoughts. One is, how do you hold your own mind? Where do you go? What do you do? It just to hold all of the pain and the difficulty and the blankness feels very challenging. And also, it feels like when you talk about at one moment, there's something about a shift in the frame of the relationship. whether it's allowing the patient to call in between sessions. Yeah, so I was just interested in your thoughts around that.
This is a long question, and it will be a long answer. One thing is that it's very much, and it's not being here because it's a paper, but it's very much related to Winnicott's regression, to the regression. And when you are in regression, the patient, when you go with the patient to a regression makes you work with the patient in a way that is I don't know how to say it, very much like you try to find or to feel the needs of the patient, the scream of the patient, not what he's doing. And because of this, when you say how you hold your mind, I don't hold my mind. I let my mind go with the situation, with the scene, with the things that are said and with the things that are not said. And I think that, according to your question, sometimes being with the patient in a traumatic situation is even less painful and less difficult than in being in blankness. Because when a patient comes to you, like Ben here, and say, zilch, nothing, you feel that this nothing is all over the place. And what are you doing there? You are becoming nothing. And what I'm trying to say is that if you become nothing and you allow yourself to become nothing, and allow yourself like this person again and again saying to me, nothing happened, nothing is going, nothing is changing, you begin to be in a situation that you know nothing about, something about nothing that you did not know before, because you know it. And because of this, I think that it's very important that Bion differentiated in late Bion between identification and attunement. Because you don't identify with the blankness, you are at one with the blankness. I'm not sure that I can explain it, but experientially that is a different. Or if you just mention the beyond sexuality, beyond beyond perversion, that the patient was very, very seriously pervert. I am not becoming pervert, I am becoming the loneliness of the perversion, and it's something different, or the traumatic of the perversion. And I'm not sure that I know how to explain it, but to say again and again, this is for me attunement. You go into the situation and you become in the situation. You become part of the situation, not because you identify, but because you are so solely within the situation. And I think that when you are so much inside the situation, you, in a way, you look for something to do, to feel, to create, even for yourself. And this goes together with the patient, and the two of you together goes outside. Although it's important for me to emphasize that sometimes it takes time. With Ben, you saw that again and again, this man told me, I'm going, the treatment is useless. And he really felt it, and I really went with him. And sometimes I ask myself when I read this treatment, how did I allow him to come again and again back to treatment? Because I had some other option to work with patient, and yet when he said to me, I'm coming back, I said, please come back. It was something strongly inside me that we are going to find a way hopefully, that will change the situation. And in fact, he's now married, he has two sons, he's I think that I can say that in many respects he's a happy person. He's good, he feels good with his life. And it's important. But it was many years of treatment. It was 12 years of treatment.
Thank you. Sure.
I think we now have Vanessa Hemp wanted to ask a question.
Thank you. That was incredibly moving. I think I've got more comment than a question based on two cases of mine that came to mind. The one was a woman about my own age who I saw for very many years, who as a small baby was born with eczema all over her body, to the point where her skin would crack and break. And her mother, they would have to bind her in lots and lots of bandages. But because of her state, she couldn't actually physically be held by her mother or resisted it. It's not clear how the mother engaged or compensated for this, but she was quite an overwhelmed, stressed person herself. The mother was the impression that I got. And what I would find with this patient is she would get totally overwhelmed and sit in the room with me. And it wasn't that she lost her scream, but it was that it would feel as if we would sit in the room and she would scream and yell and protest, to the point where I would sit there feeling quite bombarded, overwhelmed, wanting to retreat into a protective shell myself in this onslaught. And I think I was just thinking about how hard it is at times to step into that being at oneness when some of those feelings feel incredibly difficult. I think for me, part of what was different was the rage rather than the pain felt harder to bear. So it's just that very much came to mind when I was listening to your case and how difficult being in that state as a therapist can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. But according to Winnicott, in a way, the rage, although the therapist or the analyst, it's difficult, it's so difficult. But according to Winnicott, this is better than despair, because rage means that there is somewhere the feeling that if something occurs, something will change. Mm-hmm. While despair is complete despair. And Winnicott thinks that these moments of rage are a sacred moment. This is what he writes in chapter 1, Playing in Reality. And because of this, you should not try to change the rage, but you have to allow the rage come out, because it says, I'm still hoping that something will happen.
It's the hopeful cry for help and for change.
Yes, it's the hopeful cry. It's the cry that is still crying, even though it sounds so raging. There is Andre Green, in the negative. Andre Green took this part of chapter 1 in Playing in Reality, which was new, that Winnicott puts it only in his book, in this book, not when he wrote the paper 20 years ago and all the years that came till he published the book. But when he published the book, it was half a year after his death. But still, in the last part, he brought this um, he calls it a clinical example, and he brought a woman that all the time everything for her was nothing. And Andre Green took it and he said, and he relied on other chapter in this Playing Your Reality, when Winnicott speak about the mother that are not there for X plus Y plus Z. And the Z area is this complete devastation. And Andre Green said, yes, this is the negative. After a sort of time, not knowing exactly how much it is for every individual, instead of waiting for something to change, the patient feel like maybe Ben, that the mother died. She will not come back. And the mother died, and this is the negative. So when you come to treatment with this sort of people, you cannot go from death to life, because it's not true. You can go from death or absence that is a void to absence that has a hope in it, before you can go to another thing. And I think that your patient, when she is raging, according to Winnicott, and maybe Andre Green also, this is the moment that she is not in the void. She is in the place that this absence of the mother being holding her, but this is an absence that you can rage, that you can be angry at, because if you are angry, you may something still wants to say it can be changed.
Thank you. That is very helpful to hold in mind.
I think that it's very hard to hold such patient. I'm completely identified with this. But I think that when you think about this in this way, it gives it a meaning. And when there is a meaning, there is something to go with. And when you go with, you find something that you would not find if you don't go with.
Absolutely. And it's being able to stay in it with her rather than retreat and try and shield and protect myself in a way that perhaps her own mother did.
And also sometimes we have to protect ourselves, but then come back to the unprotected field or void. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vanessa. Just checking. Who else wants to ask a question? Please feel free to raise your hand.
Bruce, maybe I said it in a too much certain way, but I want to say it so strongly, because I know for myself and for my students and supervisees, and of course patients, how difficult is this situation. And it's important for me to say, like what I just say now, that the situation, it's important not to lose hope. Because the hope of this situation is the difference between absence without hope, or death, psychic death without hope, and psychic death with hope. Because it's strange, but psychic death with hope might come back to life.
I think that is such a fundamental question, because I think what becomes so difficult is the survival of the therapist. You know, and I think it's been kind of raised by other people here today, is that this work does require courage, and one has to kind of cross the barrier again and again and again. and how do we look after ourselves? I see Mike Ben wants to ask a question, so I'm going to hand over to Mike. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. It was such a lovely paper, and in part it's so painful when one sits with him, and you describe it so beautifully. And I think one can relate to being in the room with people and sitting with such difficult, painful feelings. And my question really is going on to what Bruce was saying. And what I was wondering in terms of the impact on the analyst or the therapist, and in terms of, I suppose, actually bodily. With the Life Esidimini, we saw a lot of the therapists working there actually ended up getting sick and having health problems because of the exposure to the trauma. I was also thinking when one talks to people who work with children, it's so physical, it's so and can have such an effect. So I was wondering about that. I mean, how does one think about managing the physical response when a lot of this is sitting physically with patients like this? We do it, but I was just wondering in terms of your thoughts on that.
This is why I said that I think that Winnicott's regression is very helpful. Because if you relate to the patient like a sick child or a sick baby, it helps to feel that you have inside you the ability to wait, to believe, to hope. Many things. Late beyond text, the word faith, which is very, very strong. But I am ready to stay with the hope, not with the faith. But I think that the whole thing of regression in treatment is a problematic thing. Winnicott divided a patient with regression into three groupings. One is the, how I said, neurotic, so-called, he called it so-called neurotic, and he said that they don't need regression. But after a year, after he wrote this paper in 1954, and then in 1955 he wrote another paper and said even these patients that are so-called neurotic had to have, in a difficult situation in treatment, regression. But then he goes to a moderate regression with borderline, with a patient of a weak borderline, he calls it. And then he goes to the deep regression. And there is something very strange, because it's divided this deep regression with the patient into two very different kind of patients. On the one, there are psychotic and borderline, and nobody is surprised that they need regression in treatment, if you can give them regression. But on the other hand, he said that this is the false self. And the false self, according to Winnicott, are the most successful people in reality. Why? Because when they were babies, they had a mother or depressed or narcissistic or something that could not stand the spontaneous gesture of the baby. She wanted the baby to be what she needs the baby to be. And the baby understands very quickly. And if he or she is intelligent, he understands it more quickly that they had to be like what the mother needs them to be in order to be loved by her or connected to her. And so they very quickly become what the mother needs them to be. And then they go to school and they are a good pupil because they know what the environment needs. And then they go to university and so on. And in life, they can become very successful because there are professions that are needed it very much, like I don't know how to say, finance, or like communication, or like many things that needs the patient the person to understand the environment and provide something that the environments need, like Facebook. All these things are very connected to feeling what the environment needs. So this man or woman, this individual can become very successful, and he can have much money, and he can have a beautiful wife or a husband, and everything seems perfect. So what is the problem according to Winnicott? And this is very much Winnicott. According to Winnicott, when this person comes to the age of 40 or 45 or something like this, and he is successful, at some point, there are attacks of anxiety or of depression that are ununderstandable, because even if the situation is complicated in some way, this successful person should not, or not expected to enact in such a emotional way. And even Winnicott says that even though many people would talk about the life crisis, the age crisis, the middle-age crisis, for him it's completely different. For him it's the psyche or the soul of this patient suddenly cries, I don't want to be so impoverished, so non-existent. I want to be alive. And this is a problem, because this successful person, in order to go to the treatment or to analysis and be suddenly so very regressed, because the regression is the place where the thing began, the infancy, the childhood. It's against the rule of the world of this patient. And many times people wait for this patient to go to treatment or to psychiatric treatment and come back and be healthy again, and not with all these sudden attacks of anxiety and of depression. And in order to treat this kind of patient, according to Winnicott and according to my own clinical experience, you had to have a hope in the understanding that if a patient really find a way to connect his lost true self, something better will come to life. But it's complicated to be so much a believer in true self and in psychotherapy or psychoanalysis.
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's interesting. One can think of, or myself, of patients who've had that, have come in at that sort of around that age, where everything seems to, on the surface, seem so be going so well in their life. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Can we bring up Clint? There we go. Hi, Clint. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eshel. I was particularly fascinated to watch the notion of zilch and to watch how it transformed through the sequence that you presented, and sort of transforming from a zilch to a no chance, then back to a zilch again, then to no change, and then to change. And it really made me think about the zilch in the first place, that it was, I guess, as I read it, some kind of representation, a kind of a zilch that stood in for nothing. And
Yeah.
as I was listening to the case, I sort of felt in some way relieved that at least there was a zilch to start with, some kind of a mechanism, even though it was a zilch, but it was a zilch that began the interaction, and then how you had worked with the zilch and how it kind of progressed and went back again, and eventually was able to become a much more elaborated idea, an elaborated signifier. And I was very moved by that, and yeah, that at least this kind of abyss of his breakdown did have one word. It had one word to start with. And it
Yes,
was the
it's a
one
nice
that,
idea. I did not think about it like this because in Hebrew the word is stam, which means nothing, nothing, nothing of the nothing of the nothing. And when I translated this, tried to translate this paper, I my translator said, "We'll write nothing." I said, "No, it's not nothing. It's something more stronger, much more." I did not know how to say it, but strong should be stronger because it was so much nothing, but nothing in a very bad way. I don't know how to say it, and it's nice that you say that this is so. It's also his word. It's not that he said something very common, but I think that I don't know if it was clear enough that this man, although he was so handsome, he was really handsome, a man, young man. No woman stayed with him more than a night or two, because there was something so empty about him, but empty in a bad way, that you could not stand it, that you could not feel that some sort of hope will be for a relationship with him. And I did not feel it so strong as when I said to myself again and again and again, this man that was intelligent, was beautiful, no girl would be able to stay with him more than a week. It was astonishing. And this is, for me, this zilch. This is zilch. It's not nothing, it's zilch.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Eshel.
Thanks, Clint. I'm going to ask Vanessa Gaydon wants to ask a question.
I'm not sure that it's a question, and it's. I love what Clint has just brought up in terms of the language, and because I was thinking when you were presenting this case, how would you have found the last scream? How would you have found this if his mother weren't around? And it made me think of your paper on beyond sexuality and beyond perversion, where the man kept talking about ice cream, and then ultimately it became ice cream, and that you've got to find that signifier. And what I thought with your case when you were first presenting it, and you presented that Julie, after 3 months, their relationship wasn't going to last, but Julie said that she really wanted to stay, but then she left. And then after she left him, he continued to write him the letters. And what would have happened if the mother, what went through my mind is, how would this have progressed if we didn't have the mother's account of what happened at 3 months and then 4 months and with the brother? And what it made me think of is a fairly new case that I'm working with in psychotherapy twice weekly. And she's a 57-year-old, and she first came to therapy and said that her brother had insisted that she comes to therapy because he's in therapy and they need to work through the trauma of their childhood. But when she narrates things about her childhood, I mean, she tells me some pretty horrific things, but she doesn't describe them. The mother is idealized. The father, she feels enormously sorry for. And she's she was in her past, a very, very creative person. I don't want to give too much detail about her, but her career is in a very creative space. And everything seems to have collapsed. And it seems to have collapsed around 2017 and 2018. And her mother died sort of 2 years before that period, and her father died 2 years after that period. But she's very uncontained. She's very disorganized. Her career is pretty much collapsed. She's lost all of her relationships. And what was really interesting is and she's also become an alcoholic, and she's very much a recluse. And what happened a couple of weeks ago was that her cat, who is her only companion of life, died.
Yeah.
And she came to therapy on the day that the cat died, and she walked into my rooms. In fact, the alcohol fumes preceded her into my rooms. And she walked into my rooms and she said, "I'm drunk." And she told me that we'd been expecting the cat to die, and she told me that the cat had died, and she was very drunk. And she wailed, she cried, she was enormously distressed. And then as she was walking out the door, she said to me, "I am really worried about myself and my safety." And I said, "I am too. Can I call someone to collect you? Because I don't think you should be driving." Anyway, she said no, and she left. And then she left me a message the next day saying, "I'm not coming today," because she comes on a Thursday and a Friday. She said, "I'm not coming today." I said, "I think that's probably a good idea." And I said to her that I think she needs to go and see a doctor or somebody. Anyway, to cut a long story short, since that session, she stopped drinking. And she continues to talk about the trauma of her childhood, but also describing these idealized parents. And it is a very new therapy. It's only a couple of months old, but she is unraveling, and she is sort of regressing. And so going back to Clint's point, how am I going to find the ice cream or the zilch and I suppose I'm just going to have to listen for it. But she is all over the place.
One thing that I want to say is that the trauma don't come quickly into the room. You can see that even with this patient, when his mother said to him, "Terrible thing happened, I want to tell you this," he said no. It's strange because we saw that something might happen, and so when she said, I'm going to tell you, he said no. And he needed me to hear it and to be moved by it. But to say to me that for him is zilch, it's nothing. And it's like I was a part of his psyche that felt the thing and not him. And it took him time to come to this thing in his own pace. So I would say about your patient, and of course I say it in a very simplified way, that when the cat died, And she came so very drunk and went home and said to you, I would not come the 2 days afterwards to the session. I would say to her, please come. Because I think that this was a moment to be together, not to be there. And I would say even, all this, thinking about this moment in therapy, and also there is a Bolas book, Catch Them Before They Fall, that when a patient comes into a situation which is so painful, suddenly you have to be with her. Bolas says that he had to take 3 days, all the weekend, and stay with the patient from morning to afternoon in order to stay with the situation. So you can do it, and you can do it in other way, but never, I think to myself, never let the patient, when he says the things are horrible, I cannot come, never say to the patient, don't come, go to the doctor. No, come to me and then go to the doctor, because it's a very painful and important moment of being really exposed to the inner feelings without putting the defenses again on her. So I think that she felt that you are with her. This is the way I understand that she becomes less drunk or not less alcoholic. But I think that it's very important in this moment not to say to the patient, go to the doctor, not to say to the patient, go and take a medicine, psychiatric medicine, but first come to me, and then, if needed, go to other places. But not give the patient the feeling that because it's so awful, it's not with you. Had to be with someone else. Not hospitalization, not medicine, not drugs. First, come to me. And when you come to me, we'll think what to do with this.
Okay. That totally, I mean, I have to be honest, my anxiety was her driving a long distance drunk and coming to me. But what you're saying makes absolute sense. Thank you.
I completely understand it, but she can take a taxi and not to come to you by herself. Also, maybe it's needed that does not take, does not drive herself and take somebody to take her, because it's all the feelings that somebody had to help. It's not a situation to remain alone with this situation.
I agree. Thank you.
And I know that we are very anxious in such moments, and we really like to feel that somebody else, a doctor, a psychiatrist, a hospital can do the work. Maybe, but first we have to meet it, and then something else can be suggested, or not. Sometimes it's no need to. Winnicott to Margaret Little said, you come out of the room, stay in another room, wait until you will be able to drive again. This is what she wrote about him, not him. Not he wrote it. And Margaret Little, again, she was not a psychotic patient. She was a successful doctor and then psychoanalyst. But in these moments, you have to hold the patient like you hold a lost baby. And this is very important. This goes to the body, not only to the thinking. This is making a new experience.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. We've got a question from in the chat group from Sophie Wasson, and she's asking, how do you distinguish, it's a lovely question, between hope and faith?
Good morning from Los Angeles. Thank you so much for your work. This is profoundly moving and touching. You had referenced a few minutes earlier your ideas about hope versus beyond's faith. You made a little bit of comment that you're not quite ready for the faith part per se. Can you say a bit more about that and how you think about the two?
I think that Winnicott is trying to find a word that is more used. And when Winnicott writes his paper in 1954, the paper, the most important papers that he wrote about regression, metaphysical and clinical aspect of regression, he brought it to this paper he brought to the British Psychoanalytic Society that was divided then to the Freudian with Anna Freud, the Kleinian with Melanie Klein, and in between there becomes the psychoanalysts that were not completely Kleinian nor completely Freudian, and this was the middle group, and then it became afterwards an independent group. But the situation when he brought this paper to the British psychoanalytic situation was very, very, very dense, because all this controversial issue were very strong in the era, especially then. And he wanted to explain what is regression for him. And what he said, and it's very strong, he said that when the mother of the child or of the baby, especially the environmental mother, what he called environmental mothers, or the mother that is pre-object, is failing, this is for the child horrible. And so what the child is doing, he freezes the situation. He freezes the situation, and then he can go on living, but he had this frozen part. But along this frozen part, there is a hope, according to Winnicott, and he used the word hope, that at a later stage, and it can be unconscious and it can be not unconscious, but conscious, that at a later stage, there will be a situation in which the frozen part may be unfrozen, re-experience, and come to life when the patient is regressed, and there is another sort of environment, which is for Winnicott, of course, the treatment and the therapist. This is 1954. But then, 10 years or maybe more, nobody knows exactly when Winnicott wrote The Fear of Breakdown. First, it was thought that it was in his last life, year of life, because he never republished this paper. But then, when Claire Winnicott and two other Winnicottian collected all his papers that were not published and put them in the book that is called Psychoanalytic Explorations, they found the paper, The Psychology of Madness. And Psychology of Madness was written 1965. So if it was written 1965, The Fear of Breakdown should have written before, because The Psychology of Madness is a sort of continuation of Winnicott's Fear of Breakdown. So now it is written 1963 with a question mark, or 1974 when Claire Winnicott gave it to publication, and there is the publication. But she herself, when she gave it to publication, she still thought that it was the last year of Winnicott's life. But if it was written 7 years before, it's a question why Winnicott never published this paper. Because this paper, he wrote in the very beginning of the paper, this comes from my clinical experience, it's something new to me. And I think that it will be second sentence, it will also, I think, will be new to you. So if he saw that it's so much important, why he did not publish it? Never. And there are people that thought that after he was in 1968 in New York and was attacked on his paper, The Use of the Object, he did not dare. But the paper on fear of breakdown, if it's written in 1963, it's before. And I think it's my own thinking, but I don't think that I am wrong, that he was so he felt so much about this paper, and he really felt that it's something new, very new for him as a therapist or analyst of so many years, that he did not dare to expose this paper, and he wanted to hold it more or not expose it because he was afraid of exposing it. So I think what is so frightening about this paper? But this paper, I think that it's so frightening because Winnicott, the word hope was not enough for him. Because the hope that he wrote about 10 years ago was good enough to say for the frozen part of the patient, that the patient tries succeed in freezing the failure situation. But in a fear breakdown, he speaks about something that was so awful that the patient could not even freeze it. He had to unexperience it. He had to be there, and that the thing occurred and not occurring anymore, so like a sort of psychotic defense. It's not existent, and for it he did not find a word, and in a way, Bion find a word because he dared to say and dared to become late Bion, dared to become even mystic in a way, and to say this is faith. You have to, being a psychoanalyst in this states of non-existent, you have to have faith that the situation of the treatment will change something in this thing. And for him, this thing was this awe, this transformation in awe, which means atonement. So beyond dare to say something that Winnicott did not dare to say so strongly.
Thank you.
But we need to remember that Winnicott had that first thought, but he, for whatever reason, didn't feel he was ready, or it was too frightening.
Yeah, I think that he did not want to be attacked. And you have to take into consideration that Bion, in order to say what he wrote in 1970 in Attention and Interpretation, in his last metapsychological book, he left London and he went to Los Angeles. And all the 11 last years of his life, when he brought this last Bion, he was not in London anymore because he felt that the Kleinian would not allow him to go to these places. And he went to Los Angeles and went all around the world in South America and in New York and in Paris. But all these things were not written anymore in London.
Thank you, Sophie. Just before we conclude, we have about a minute left. Laurie Dawes has requested he come and say something, and I can't hesitate.
Larry always.
We have to have the opportunity. He's here.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Eshel, thank you for, again, a beautiful article. I remember reading your work more than 10 years ago for The Living Moment, and working in a forensic setting with someone that acted out sexually. And it was one of the first papers I read where sitting Shiva with someone analytically came alive for me. And I tried to translate it into my home language, Afrikaans. And Shiva, the best word that can come up in Afrikaans is nachtwaak. It's being awake in darkness or with darkness. And I think you, one of those analysts that truly set a kind of a hopeful Shiva for dead and deadened parts of the self, which is astounding. So again, thank you for your work. It keeps those parts in us alive as a possibility.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Dr. Eshel, and sadly I have to conclude this afternoon. And I mean, I think there's so many more questions from other people. It's been an extraordinary time. It was a beautiful, incredibly moving paper, and the conversation afterwards was so rich. And my heart is full, and it feels like we truly honored Coralie today. So from me, thank you, and my hand over to Mike just to finish off.
Thank you very much. It really was lovely and moving, and I think a fitting tribute to Coralie, and I think your work is wonderful. So thank you very much, and thank you everybody for attending. And yeah, and I think it's been a wonderfully good psychoanalytic feed. So thank you very much.